It's time to push. So I was dilated to a 10 and it was time to push. And I was like, and so it was time to push. And I started on my back at first, and because they kind of wanted to, tell me how to push, make sure I was pushing correctly, all that good stuff, get me in position, make sure I was comfortable. And so, they hoist your legs back, and you have the one nurse on one side, and then Anthony was holding my leg on the other side, and then the doctor, of course, is in front. I hold, and they taught me, how to push, and I had already looked up videos on how to push and pushing techniques, where you should feel it. And honestly, my yoga practice did help with that portion of like sending energy to a certain part of your body, especially like the inside and not necessarily like a muscle area. Yoga helped with that. And of course, like the breathing and the meditation and concentration and that sort of thing. So I went through, the contraction was coming up. And even though I had an epidural, I could feel like the pressure of the contraction happening. So like I knew when one was coming, and they were like, that's great, And I think also my yoga practice helped with knowing my body and knowing what's happening with my body and being, pretty in tune to that. Getting back on track. I go through my first contraction, and you do like 3 pushes through your first contraction, right? And they were like, that's great. This is great. Just keep doing that, and we're gonna have a baby in no time. Like, you are pushing so well. And I was like, yay, I'm doing it. And so I go through like 2 more of that, like 2 more contractions. So altogether like 9 pushes, and nothing's really happening. And so I was like, let's, try my right side. And so we get on my right side and we start pushing, do like 3 contractions there. And then I turn to my left side and I try contractions there. And this entire time, the baby, like for 2 hours of pushing, the baby was at a station 2 to begin with and remained at a station 2. I was getting tired. She could tell I was getting tired. And this was like after, an hour and 40 minutes to 2 hours of pushing. She was like, let me try to assess this situation. She felt my belly, and she was like, okay, well, he has head down. He has this. And she checked, and she was like, I can feel his, like the soft part of his head. He's in the canal. And so I pushed a little bit more, and you could actually see his head. Like, they got a mirror, and like, where I could see, and you could see his like head and his hair, like in there. It was wild. I was like, he's right there. I can do this, he's right there. And so I tried pushing some more. And so after like 2 hours and 30 minutes of pushing, and he's not dropping. He is, how the doctor said is he's gaining a little bit out, but then he's like, as soon as I stop pushing, he just kind of goes back in. So it's like the pressure of me pushing sends him like a little bit out, but as soon as I stop pushing, he just goes back to station 2. Like, he's not progressing through my birth canal. And so she suggested, she was like, it's been 2.5 hours. He's not coming out. We could do a C-section if you'd like. And I was like, do we have to? And she was like, we don't have to at this point. We will, she said something about like, if you're doing like 5 hours of pushing and nothing's happening, then they will do a C-section. Like, at that point, it's like medically needed. I was like, is there anything else we can do? She was like, okay, well, what we can do is we can bring in a consultant and see if a vacuum could help, because what a vacuum will do is it just kind of goes on his head, and as you're pushing, they're pulling. So it's like a push-pull to like encourage him out. So they bring in the technician, and she does an ultrasound, and I didn't get quite all the information from the ultrasound, but she said, no, absolutely not. You cannot do that. What she can do is either keep pushing until the mark where they call it, or a C-section. But there's no way a vacuum is gonna help because that baby's head is huge. Like, you're only feeling the soft part in there. There's no telling that even if we get the baby's head into like the birth canal deep enough, that his shoulders are gonna fit. Like, no. And so she was like, I'm not doing it. You can get another technician in here to see if another technician will help you with the vacuum, but I will not. So I was like, okay, fine, I will keep pushing. And so I keep pushing, but the pressure is so much. And at this time, the epidural has worn off again. Like, I don't know if it's just my body doesn't take well to pain medication for like an extended period of time, but my epidural stopped working. And so I am in, again, the throes of labor, in pushing, and I hadn't been feeling pain for a good 5 hours, and now I'm just feeling all of the pain. So that was fun. At this time, you know, I'm just like, it hurts so much. He's not progressing. Like, I feel awful. Oh yeah, I had thrown up, you know, like it was not a good situation. I was not feeling well. I was so exhausted mentally and physically. And Anthony, he was so like encouraging. And I remember at one point, side note, all through my pregnancy, we binge watched all seasons of Survivor. And in Survivor, the host, Jeff, he's always like to the contestants, you gotta dig deep. And so we would always joke that, you know, Anthony could encourage me like Jeff. And so he did try to do that. But in the throes of labor, it's not as fun or funny. You know, honey, I love you, but you're gonna have to shut up. I remember saying that. I was like, I love you, but stop talking. Like, right now, I can't. It's so irritating. His voice was so irritating to me during labor, but I tried to be so nice about it. I was like, deep breath, Anthony, dear, I love you, but shut up. Where was I? Right. Okay. So I was super exhausted at this point, but Anthony, he was very encouraging. He knew I did not want a C-section. He knew, you know, my birth plan. I had gone over it with him. He was like, okay, look, you really wanted to try hands and knees. You really wanted to try that position. I know you've wanted to do it. And if you know, you're going to look back, and if you didn't do it, you're going to think, what if? And so I was like, you know, he's right, I can do it. So I mustered all of the strength in me, and the doctor was like, are you sure? You know, like, your legs are still non-functional really. And I was like, look, the epidural is like worn off, like I can do it. And so they turn me over, I'm on the back, I'm like kind of like squatted a little bit, holding on to the back like this. And when the contractions come, you know, you bear down and you push, and you breathe through it, of course, but you know, you're pushing. Anyways, like gravity help. And she checks and she's like, oh, he's a station 3. He came down. And she was like, we might be able to have a baby this way if you can stay like this. And I was like, there's no way I can go through one more contraction like this. Like, I was shaking. You know how like your muscles are so worked that they just shake? Like, that's where I was. And I just started crying, and I was like, I'm too exhausted. Like, I can't do it. I cannot do it. And at that point I was like, but you can, you can. But my body was like, Emily, you have to know when to push and when to just stop. Like, it's okay. And so I came to terms, and I was like, let's just do the C-section. And I was like, but I don't want a C-section. Well, let's do the C-section. I don't want a C-section. And so the doctors, she was like, okay, Emily, we have to know definitely, do you want a C-section? Is that where you want to go? Because I kept like going back and forth, and I was like, yes. C-section. But in my mind, I was like, I don't want a C-section. So she's like, okay, we'll get things prepared. So she leaves, and epidural completely worn off. My body is in just like pushing mode, like evacuate this baby from me. The nurses are away preparing, and I'm just like there, and my body is like, okay, it's time to push. And I was like I just was like pushing, and I remember like not screaming bloody murder, but like letting out like, ah, you know, of pushing and trying to do that. But my body was so exhausted, but it was like this urge, like my body was just urging me to do it. And the nurse was so sweet. She was like, honey, you gotta try to not push. And I just look at her, and she's like, I know, but honey, try not to. And I was just like, I can't. Anyways, and then the pain was so intense that I was just like, Anthony, just knock me out. Just go ahead. Just knock me out. It'll be fine. Just, I can't with the intense pushing and everything. I was just like, I'm so done. I am so done. And so this lady comes in, and she injects something into my epidural port. And I personally think it was morphine or something like it, or whatever they use to like numb you for the C-section, because I could feel it like go into my back and just like slither its way through. And it was like all cold and nice. No pain. It took like 2 minutes, no pain whatsoever. And I was just like, oh, I can relax. I can finally relax. And they have me, you know, sign the waiver of, you know, because it's major surgery and whatnot. And they wheel me in, they get Anthony prepped. Oh, that's the other thing, is before they wheeled me in, they had to pop him back up. So out of the birth canal. So they, I think, did like a balloon or something. I don't know what they did, but they popped him back up out of my birth canal so that they could do the C-section. I'm in there, they put my arms like this. They don't tie me down. I hear that sometimes they like strap you down. They didn't strap me down, but they had Anthony like holding me, and then they had a nurse on this side holding me. And then one of the nurses, she was like, did you feel that? And I was like, feel what? She was like, okay, good, because we just did a test incision or a test poke or whatever with a scalpel to make sure I wasn't feeling anything. I was like, yeah, I don't feel anything. And so they go and they start the procedure. And of course they have like the blue thing right there. And it was the weirdest feeling. A C-section is the weirdest feeling, because like you feel the pressure of them, like, maybe trigger warning, but cutting, and it just feels like somebody is just like pressing on your stomach. Honestly, what it feels like is somebody is removing your guts. Like, that is what it felt like to me. I was like, these people are harvesting my kidneys. And then they tell Anthony, they're like, okay, baby's about to come out. Would you like to see? And so he pops his head over, and he got to see Riker get pulled from me. And then he cut the cord and went with the baby to like the measuring area, and they started, you know, work getting me back sewn together. And all I hear when he pulls the baby, he was like, oh, he's a big boy. At like a previous ultrasound, they measured his femur, and they were like, well, here's, you know, a roundabout estimate of what he could weigh. Of course, it could be off by a pound. And they said that he would weigh about 8 pounds, 4 ounces. And I was like, okay, that makes sense, because I was an 8 pound, 12 ounce baby, and Anthony was an 8 pound, 4 ounce baby. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. I could do an 8 pound baby, no problem. They pull him out, and they're like, no wonder he couldn't fit. And I was like, okay, well, how big is this baby? And then Anthony comes around, he's all swaddled, and he comes around with him to show him to me. He was like, he's 10 pounds, 3 ounces. And I was like, what? Like this baby literally could not fit through my birth canal. Like his head could not fit through. And so they get me stitched up. They put baby with me as they wheel me to the postpartum. Yeah, so that is how my first child, Riker, was born. He almost came out vaginally. My blood pressure going everywhere. I had the infection. I had, the GSB. I had preeclampsia, come to find out, which makes sense because the week that he was overdue, I developed intense swelling, so many complications, huge baby, epidurals that just failing. All of it was worth it because I think back and I'm like, I don't even remember the pain. Like, I know it was intense, but I do not remember it, like at all. But I do remember the joy I felt of seeing his little face and like holding him close. Like, I remember that. And it's just all worth it. Like the pain, the complications, everything, all worth it for the little guy. Anyways, that is my birth story of my first child, Riker. I couldn't have asked for a better team of nurses, and the doctor who was on call, she was amazing. I had never met her before, but the rapport she made with me before, during, and after was amazing. She assisted in the C-section. My OBGYN conducted the C-section. Just the overall experience was phenomenal. It was great. The actual physical experience, not so great. Kind of terrifying. But yeah, that is my birth story. So, okay. Bye.